Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Sandra Kelly, the UK Director for People First International, and I'm delighted to welcome you to this afternoon's webinar event, Local Food Systems and Sustainability Showcase. This event is being held to introduce a new food programme and resources to support teaching on sustainable food practice and let you hear how you can use the resources to enrich programme delivery across a range of vocational courses. Bringing this topic to life, you'll also hear from a panel of leading industry food ambassadors who will be sharing their insights and best practice. We've had a huge interest in this event with many educators from across the UK and indeed further afield. So welcome Malta and the Netherlands for joining in. And I thank you all for taking the time to attend. Your presence, albeit virtual, is a clear testament to your commitment to making a difference to how young people engage with sustainability issues. Before we begin, just to run through some housekeeping, and so you know how to participate. At any time during this webinar, you will have the opportunity to submit questions to our speakers. To do so, just type your question into the Q&A feed at the bottom of the control panel. As time permits, the panel will address as many questions as we can. At the end of the event, we will share the presentation slides and a link for you to access the free teaching resources, as well as being able to download your own certificate of attendance for CPD purposes. So my role over the next hour and a bit is to guide the proceedings and introduce our speakers. So firstly, let me share the agenda lineup. You will hear from Roisin McKee of People First International about the Food for Thought project and the programme resources which have been developed to support teaching on sustainable food practice. After that, we'll hear from Louise Davis of the Food Teachers Centre on how you can use the resources to enrich programme delivery across vocational and GCSE courses. And of course, our industry panel session will bring live insight and best practice from Chantal Nicholson, James Golding, Jim Mulholland and Roger Rahaman. To kick things off, I'd like to invite my colleague, Roisin McKee, to give us some insight to the Food for Thought project and the teaching resources which have been developed as a result of the project collaboration. Roisin has a wealth of experience in the tourism sector, gained in industry, education and community sectors in Ireland, the UK and internationally. Based in Northern Ireland, she works closely with sector employers to align government policy on skills and vocational education with their business needs, as well as being a project lead on transnational skills projects, such as the recent collaboration with EU partners on the Food for Thought project. So Roisin, over to you.
Thanks, Sandra. And good afternoon, everyone. I'm delighted to be able to introduce the Food for Thought project and to showcase its outputs, which have been developed to support teaching on sustainable food practices and equip our young people with a sound knowledge of sustainability issues. Food for Thought is an Erasmus Plus funded project, and it brings together 5 EU partners with expertise in the provision of catering, food and hospitality training. The project began back in 2017, and the overall objective has been to equip future employees in the industry with a sound knowledge of local food systems and sustainability to meet emerging trends and skills requirements. The core output of the project has been the development of an open access modular training course and resource materials to support delivery as part of hospitality and catering related courses, which I'll share with you in a bit. Alongside ourselves as a UK partner, the project consortium consists of 3 VET providers: Southwest College in Northern Ireland, who are also the lead partner for the project, Alexandra Dumas College in France, and IDAN in Iceland, all of which have strong hospitality and catering training departments. St Angela's College in Sligo complement this expertise as a provider of university level education and research in food sciences, as well as an ambassador of sustainable development culinary education. The objectives of the project saw us firstly undertake a mapping of the skills and knowledge requirements across the 4 partner countries to inform the design and content of the programme. So in the early part of 2018, we carried out extensive desk research, supplemented by an online survey of employers, sector representatives, providers and field experts to examine industry skills requirements in this area and then to identify the learning outcomes for the course. We progressed to the design of an open access modular training course, which would encourage learners to understand the significance of the local food system and enhance the labour market relevance of catering and hospitality vet training. Pilot delivery of the curricula and the course materials was focused initially on 200 learners and staff last year across the partner countries, and that was delivered through a series of demonstration workshops over a 2-month period. The pilots were delivered to test the functionality, identify weaknesses, areas of strengths and opportunities for improvement, all of which have been embedded into the revised materials. And the final objective was to introduce an online delivery toolkit that would enable providers across Europe to independently deliver the curricula and the materials. We also tested and took feedback on the toolkit as part of the pilot exercise. So based on the research, we undertook 6 bespoke learning units were identified. And they've been developed to thematically address the areas that you'll see on the screen: sustainable management in catering operations, food supply chain, food waste, trends and lifestyles, sustainable sourcing and procurement for catering operations, and a final one which looks at how businesses or an area can become a food destination. The learning outcomes, which are many, are grouped into the learning units, and they can be selected as most relevant to the learner needs, and will cover the basic facts and principles of sustainability and management for improving catering operations, the benefits of sourcing local sustainable produce, procedures to prevent waste in food production, integrating trends and lifestyle choices in business. And the course has also been constructed so that there's a combination of tutor resources, including a trainer handbook, PowerPoint presentations, podcasts, case studies, and assessments to aid delivery. The trainer handbook is a guide to help the tutor deliver the units. It outlines the objectives for each unit, what's required of the trainers, lists the resources needed, including assessments, and the activities to be completed by the students. The intention of the handbook is not to be over prescriptive, so you have flexibility for the trainer to employ your own pedagogical approaches and to concentrate on the areas that you feel need greater attention. Each learning unit has an introductory overview document. This provides a brief note on the content and the expected learning outcomes, and it's supported by delivery guidelines. There's also a suite of presentations there to assist with delivery of the learning materials, and we have a slide deck for each of the units, and you can see how they're all branded up in the Food for Thought branding. A series of podcasts have been integrated into the materials, and they focus on key points in the learning unit, and they draw from interviews with both food and industry ambassadors from the partner countries participating in the project. The main aim of the case studies that are included is to facilitate the trainer with the integration of the learning materials with some real life examples of best practice. Some of these case studies are linked to unit assessment, while others are provided for additional learning resources. And a range of individual, pair and group assessment exercises have also been developed, and you'll be delighted to know that sample answers are provided within the online toolkit as well. And the assessments cover multiple choice questions, fill in the blank exercises, written tests and creative exercises. All of the course materials are brought together in the online toolkit, which can be accessed on the project website, which is noted there at the top of the screen, and we'll share the link to directly access the materials following this session. From the online toolkit tab, as highlighted here in the slide, the user is informed how to navigate through the toolkit to deliver the course. You can view the materials online, or you can choose to download and save for offline use or print the material as you require. And I'm also delighted to announce that one of our project partners, St Angela's College in Sligo, has been successful in leading a bid on behalf of the consortium of partners to continue the project in a second phase. And this will see the creation of immersive and innovative technology-led content formats to engage younger learners. And we hope at the same time also to enthuse an interest in the hospitality and catering industry. I hope that we can continue to engage with many of you that have joined now in this exciting next project phase, which will commence proper in the new year. And there'll be more details on that later. For now, that concludes my presentation. I'd like to thank you for listening. I hope that you will take the opportunity to make use of the resource materials to support your teaching on sustainable food practices and to make a real difference to how young people engage with sustainability issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Roisin, for a really informative presentation. I've no doubt that the programme and the resources will play a key role to supporting teachers to introduce young people to sustainability issues. So our next speaker, Louise Davis, I first met a couple of years ago, and she's the founder and the lead for the Food Teachers Centre. She's been in food education for over 30 years as an experienced teacher and subject leader. She recently worked for the United Nations School Food and Nutrition Education Programme and is the Ofqual subject advisor for exams in food preparation and nutrition and home economics. She was advisor to the Department for Education and writer of the new 2016 GCSE Food Preparation and Nutrition exam. Louise leads innovation across a diverse range of high-profile curriculum and professional development programs and is nationally recognised for groundbreaking and high-impact work in food education. Louise, can I invite you please to share your perspective on how the programme and the resources can be used by teachers to support their course delivery and the courses it can support.
Thank you, Sandra. It's been a real privilege to help People First and their partners set up this event for all those involved in food education, whether you're here today representing a school or a college or another training provider. Today, you'll get to hear firsthand from the industry about what sustainability means to the hospitality industry and how the modern industry is addressing the current issues. We shouldn't underestimate how important it is for the young people of today to have a good understanding of sustainability issues and our role in teaching this right now. Some people that are in our classes today are going on because they want to have a career as a chef, and these resources will give them an enormous head start in what's ahead in their future. But others won't be. Not all of our students are destined to become chefs or enter the hospitality and catering sector, but all our young people are consumers of tomorrow. Their understanding about what different restaurants and food providers are doing will be key to them making better choices in the future. I'm encouraging you all today to take advantage of these free resources that are being launched for two reasons, really. One, that you can make a huge difference in how young people engage with sustainability. And these will be the young people leading the way on addressing these issues in the future. And then secondly, that these resources can help you effectively deliver the exam courses you're currently teaching. An exciting part of these resources is that are linked to all the current teaching requirements for exams right across the whole set of vocational and academic qualifications we have across the UK. You'll be able to quickly identify topics that fit with your current courses and download the resources you need to teach them. Some of the topics I suggest that you take a look at for your current teaching include creating a sustainable kitchen, the food chain from sea and farm to fork, waste in food production, the 3 R's, the benefits of using local ingredients, trends and lifestyles, and planning for using locally sourced ingredients and seasonal menus. For those teachers that teach hospitality and catering, you'll be aware that there's a requirement in Unit 2 when they're going through that assessment where they're developing a new cafe or a food service outlet, where they have to explain how they've addressed the environmental concerns of the menu that they are putting forward. Not all of our students perform well in this part of the assessment, so these resources could really help them do much better at this part of the assessment criteria. If you're a GCSE teacher here, you can see that there's topics on our written papers, and these questions come up every year to test this understanding around sustainability issues. When the course was updated in 2016, there was a deliberate focus on students having a better understanding of where food comes from, the whole concept of from farm or sea to fork, environmental impacts of food production, seasonality, and so on. And we know that the higher marks go to those students that can explain and give examples, so the resources could really help with that. You'll also know, those of you familiar with the GCSE, that they have to apply this in practice too, as many of the practical tasks that are set by the exam boards will often focus and use seasonality and locally sourced ingredients as a requirement. So I'm going to simply give you a glimpse of how the resources might be used for some of your current courses. These are free and downloadable, so that makes them perfect for our current situation. You might be teaching in bubbles, you might only be teaching class-based work at the moment, or you might even have some students that are home-based. These resources can be uploaded to your school intranet or Google Classroom. You can share them with your students. You can post your students and families links so that they can join in this learning at home. For home study and class teaching, there's PowerPoints and videos and quizzes of these topics that you can download and use, or you can adapt them to meet your current scheme of work. They're simple and visual. These presentations are ready to use, saving you lots of time, so that you can use them if you want to for flipped learning. Now, flipped learning is where you ask the students to work independently through the material at home, and then you come back into the classroom and they make mini presentations to discuss what they have learned by doing that out of the classroom. There's some really good examples of case studies that are on YouTube. And one of the issues we have at the moment is about bringing learning to life. And many of our schools obviously can't get out as they would usually be doing, out on visits or to have visitors into school. So this is an excellent way to use these linked videos to bring that learning to life and make it more memorable for the students, and have these real stories from real producers, real food producers, so that the students can actually apply what they are learning and understand how it's operating currently. It saves you a huge amount of time. There's further links that have already been suggested, so that if you've got more able students, you can suggest these are places where they can get further information and further case studies. Perhaps if you have a bit more time, you have some more able students, or even personally for yourself, if this is a new area that you're learning about, learning to teach your students, you're a non-specialist teacher, these are excellent for your own CPD as well. And also, we have linked assessments, as Roisin explained. These are suggested ready-made assessments and quizzes that make great tests, great remote learning tests or homeworks for the students to test them at the end of each topic. If you're working across our vocational courses, again, the examples that really do link across giving valuable insights into industry, and we'll hear more of these from our panelists as well, but really making this learning come to life for our students is one of the things that many of us finding it very difficult to access the real life learning at the moment. Our hospitality and catering level 1 and 2 were expected for that to be set in a real working environment. These resources will really help you to do that at a time when your student can't invite the industry partners you might usually have to work inside the school with them. You can't set up visits outside of school. And also, many of us are finding it very difficult to set up model working environments where the students might feel like it, what it's like to work in the industry for real, but it might be something they're modeling in their school, for example, conducting school events or school hospitality events that they might be doing. So this gives you a chance to use some of the case studies and information, videos, resources that are provided to replace some of those things that we're all finding a bit difficult at the moment. Particularly one thing that's very apparent from the resources, there's many things that you can pick and choose from, and the resources can be used very flexibly across a range of courses and range of levels for students. But one thing to bear in mind is that these are based on memorable key concepts. They're simplified but made engaging. We're hoping that these help the students be able to remember them as they go forward, both now, perhaps for their examinations, but also in the future. What you'll find is that all of the information here is very up to date and relevant to what is happening right now. So students are aware of the modern practices that are going on in the industry right now. And again, as I stated before, one of the things that's very key about this is there's some assessments that are linked at the end of each topic. And one of the things about the Hospitality and Catering Unit 2, where the students are expected to look at providing a menu and what it'd be like to set up a new food outlet. One of the suggested assessments links very closely to that. It's almost like you could run a mock run through of that unit 2. So if you use this case study about setting up a new provision, it's a great preparation for unit 2 assessment. So certainly worth a look at those sorts of things. So a whole variety of things that can be used in a variety of ways, which is what we like. So in summary then, I hope that after this session, you'll certainly find time to visit that website that Roisin mentioned and download have a look, review, download the parts of the toolkit that you'll find most useful in your teaching currently. We're really lucky that this team has been able to put these together and offer these for free. In the end, what we're hoping, this is a first step really, that we can take these next steps together and move our practice beyond some of the obvious teaching that we might have going on currently, just about food miles and recycling, perhaps to a more deeper understanding of the more complex issues that there are, so that young people can play a central role in the future of changing menu choices and food production where it's needed to safeguard our future planet. So I leave you on the screen with my top topics that I suggest that you visit when you go to the website. I mentioned them earlier, from creating a sustainable kitchen to the benefits of using local ingredients and seasonal menus are all things that you know and you'll recognise in your current courses, where you've got an opportunity to find some new resources that are well developed that you can download and use immediately to help you with some of your teaching right now. And good luck.
Well, thank you, Louise. What a great presentation, and just showing us the connections on how the resources can be used and applied in the classroom environment. So that concludes our presentations. We're on to our panel now, and we've got an excellent lineup of food and sustainability ambassadors from industry. So again, we're delighted to be joined by Chantelle Nicholson, chef owner of Treadwell's in London's West End, James Golding, Group Chef Director, Pig Hotels in Hampshire, Jim Mulholland, chef owner at number 14 at the Georgian in Northern Ireland, and Roger Rahaman, chef-to-chef manager for Nestlé Professionals Nordics. Just to remind you again, please do submit any of your questions for our speakers, and to do so, just type the question into the Q&A feed at the bottom of the control panel. Firstly then, to Chantelle, by way of introduction, she is a multi-award winning chef owner at Treadwell's in London's West End. As one of the leading female voices in the UK hospitality industry, Chantelle is an advocate for seasonality and sustainability. She champions plant-based cooking through both the restaurant and her cookbook, Planted. Originally from New Zealand and a trained lawyer, Chantelle is committed to creating a more sustainable future across her operation and activities, whilst also being an independent board member for the London Waste and Recycling Board. Chantelle, a few questions for you. Let me start with, what motivated you to change direction and take up a career as a chef? and focus on plant-based cooking?
So I think the motivation mainly came from the fact that I loved food from a very early age. And I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do when I finished high school, but thought I'd do something that was kind of quite broad, which was law and business studies. But about halfway through that, I decided that actually I needed to get a job, as the student loan was kind of racking up, and just went into a local cafe and asked if they ever needed anybody that I would love to work with them. And a twist of fate just came to the fact that they actually had a vacancy. So that's kind of where it all began. And I think for me, I just found a lot of fulfillment in cooking. It was something that I was really enjoyed, I loved. And when I'd finished my studies and gone into actually working in law, I decided that actually cooking was where I wanted to be. And was offered an opportunity in London 16 years ago now at the Savoy Grill. So that's kind of where it was solidified, I would say.
And your focus on the plant-based element?
So that probably came a bit later, but I think in hindsight, when you kind of reflect on how you grew up and what you grew up with, for me, obviously very privileged to grow up in such a beautiful country of New Zealand, which, you know, produce was just very prevalent. It was just part and parcel of growing up. And I don't think I realized that until I was much older and saw, you know, a lot of how other people, what they're exposed to growing up. And for me, I feel very, very lucky that I was exposed to that. So I guess I've always had a real love for, you know, plants, for fruit, for vegetables, and actually how they're growing. And I guess the love and care and effort that goes into it. So it was almost a natural progression for me to actually, when I had my independence, so to speak, of in terms of menu development, etc., that it was, I guess, more of the veg heavy cuisine that I focused on, and that was where I felt most comfortable with, really, and what I really enjoyed to cook as well.
So we're all interested in plant-based cooking now. So the growing interest more generally, how have you developed your menu? You know, if you think about some of the early days to some of the things that you're working on now, how have you developed your menu to respond to the growing interest in plant-based cooking?
So I think for me, it was something that I did as a, I guess, part and parcel of something I was passionate about, but also in terms of offering an inclusive dining experience to people. That was quite important to me, that you didn't feel that you had to kind of ask for too many things or feel like the odd one out when you were dining. So for me, that was, I guess, again, one of the initial kind of stages of it. And moving, I guess, fast forward to where I am now, it just, for me, obviously, I take a probably 360 approach to what we term as sustainability. I'm still not comfortable with that phrase in terms of what it sums up, but it's the best one we've got. And so for me, I don't advocate a fully kind of plant-based diet or lifestyle, but for me, it's about just being able to encourage as much of that as possible within our diets, both for our own health and for planetary health. I'm still an advocate for regenerative agriculture as well, so farming. Having grown up in New Zealand, it's a very farming culture and lifestyle, and I would, that would have a huge impact were that not to be present. So I think it's about how we do things and doing them the right way and source them. But for me, it's about, I guess, encouraging more of a plant-based, people to eat more plant-based food in terms of veggies and grains and fruit as well, derived from those sources.
Thank you, Chantal. Are you seeing any other key trends or any other lifestyle changes? And if you are, how are you responding to them?
I think interestingly, we've just done the pivot, so to speak, with doing, I'm actually at the restaurant I opened it just a week before lockdown. And so we've transformed to a shop and a takeaway. And I was very conscious of not doing, obviously in terms of packaging is a big issue right now, especially with COVID. I think it's probably exacerbated the issue rather than moving it forward. So things like keep cups and takeaway cups. It's been interesting because we've offered them from day one, and a lot of people have been hesitant to. So I think, but people have been really supportive to see us do it. So I think it's good to see people are actually really actively pursuing a more, more sustainable practices within their lifestyle. And actually, in terms of actually plant-based food, it's kind of something that we put on the menu as plant-based. It's not kind of something we shout too much about, but there's a lot of choice that goes into people choose those options above the meat options quite often as well.
Thank you, Chantal, for your insight. That's amazing. I'm going to move on to James, and we'll come back to you more generally for the panel Q&A at the end of this session. Thank you for now. So James Golding, he's the Group Chef Director at Pig Hotels in Hampshire, Fellow of the Royal Academy of Culinary Arts, and a Food Ambassador of the New Forest Mark and Dorset Food and Drink. Provenance and seasonality are the key ingredients when James builds his menus, and he works to raise interest in where his food comes from, how it's raised and how it tastes. He's committed to inspiring the next generation of chefs through the Pig Apprenticeship Programme, which has won multiple awards since its launch. So James, I have a few questions for you.
Hi, Sandra.
Hi. I want to start really by thinking about your sustainable kitchen. So can you share some of the practices in creating your sustainable kitchen?
Yeah, sure. So I just moved out of where I was sat because of noise. So I'm actually going to move back to where I was sat because you can't see my face. So
no,
I apologize about that.
That's okay.
Yeah.
Should give you a moment to move. It's like looking through the keyhole here.
Yeah, absolutely. So as far as sustainability is concerned, I mean, we've got multiple different practices that we have. The whole thing started from a sort of idea of running a country house in a similar way to how it would have run back in the day. So our sustainability journey sort of started in a sort of necessity to run a stately home with an amazing wall kitchen garden, about 13 acres, and basically trying to sort of create an atmosphere where people could come and understand that whole walled garden 2-plate concept. So that's how it began. Our apprenticeship program, which obviously is something that we're very proud of, sort of stemmed from 1 year we couldn't get an apprentice. We couldn't get anybody to come in and sort of learn from us. So we decided to start it ourselves. And the basic idea is that we have a training provider which, you know, works alongside us to give all the qualifications, but we have a pig sort of format that we work into the program.
Okay.
So the apprentices all learn everything from walled kitchen garden. So they start off their apprenticeship by working in our walled kitchen garden. So they do 2 months there, learning all about seasonality, about the produce, understanding how the whole garden works with the rotation. From that, they then learn about our local producers. So we have a 25-mile menu, which we operate, and we champion those producers on the back of the menu. So the idea is that the apprentices basically go to meet the producers and understand the passion that these guys have, which then transfers onto the menu. Later on in the apprenticeship, they actually work with the head chefs to actually get dishes onto the menu alongside everything that they've learned from that. We have a smokehouse, so they will learn the preservation side of it, which is a massive sort of sustainability thing for us. You know, we produce, excuse me, so much veg that it's very hard to sort of use it all at once. And obviously we don't want any food waste. So we develop pickling rooms and salting rooms and clamping rooms where the apprentices learn how to preserve all that amazing produce that's coming out of the garden. They have beekeeping courses, so they learn how to make their own honey. We send them on cheese academies, Bursley bread making, charcuterie classes. They understand composting. So the biggest thing that we have is obviously we want zero waste, and that's very hard to achieve in a professional kitchen. So about 8 years ago, we set up our own composting setup with the pig. So every pig, basically, all the food waste that comes out of the kitchen goes into composting. So they learn about recycling, composting, and that side of it. Foraging is another big one. So they go out and they learn how to forage with our foragers, as well as seashore veg and all of that side of it. And then moving on, we teach the basics in game butchery, fish butchery, and obviously normal butchery. So it's quite important for us that our young people and our apprentices actually understand the full process from producer to the plates, rather than just snippets of that whole sort of process.
That's amazing, James. That's really fascinating, and well done for being such an ambassador of apprenticeships in our industry. It's so critical to have these opportunities that you're offering. And before I just move on to Jim, just a final quick question for you. When you're thinking about environmental concerns, how do you take that into account when you plan your menus? I
think for us, it's very important that we know exactly where all our food is coming from. And I think within the sort of 25-mile menu, so we say that all of our producers come from within a 25-mile radius. Obviously we have 80% that we have to, give. So things like black pepper, spices, stuff like that, they don't grow. But from an environmental point of view, obviously it's less food miles, there's packaging because it doesn't have to travel, on a plane. The whole ethos is that the producers can drive to our hotel, deliver, and then within a matter of sort of hours or a day, it's on the menu. So it's cutting down on everything that you sort of think about when you're bringing food over from other parts of the world, and obviously there is things that we can't make or source locally, but we think about that very carefully before we put them on the menu. So for us, the environmental impact is quite low because of the immediacy of the mileage.
James, that's inspiring. Thank you so much. Now I'll catch up with you in a few minutes. Thank you. So next to Jim Mulholland, he's the chef owner at number 14, the Georgian House, and his native home is Northern Ireland. Jim is well known as an influential advocate of local produce and a local expert at foraging. He has a wealth of experience, including his role as executive head chef at Novella's restaurant in Belfast, from where he took the plunge to fulfill a lifelong ambition to open his own restaurant, number 14, where his menus read like a directory of Irish produce. Jim is well known for training new talent and has mentored dozens of young chefs to become keen and enthusiastic members of the culinary world in London and abroad. Hello, Jim.
Hello, Sandra. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good, thank you.
So I have a few questions for you, and I'm going to start with asking what or who was it that inspired and influenced your passion, commitment for the use of local produce?
For me, I just think the inspiration was all around me. It was in the environment. It was our local farmers, our local producers, our fishermen. I think inspiration is just all around you. You just need to look for the inspiration to see where it is. For me, it was more about ground level, on the fields with the farmers, spending time with their families, spending time with the passion that they shared in their produce and ingredients. And that, to me, I bring that back to my kitchen. I'm able to teach my students, my chefs, the passion they have. So that comes back into the kitchen. We're able to use their produce, which cuts down on wastage, because my chefs see how important the produce is to the suppliers, etc. So we were able to bring their passion back to the kitchen and use it in a valuable way.
That's brilliant. Thank you for that. And your thoughts, really, I'm going to touch a little bit on COVID-19. What are your thoughts on how sustainability will become more important in the future? COVID has had an impact on this, but let's just think for a moment about, how your business has adapted to the situation we find ourselves in.
We had to adapt very quickly because as an ongoing business, you're running the restaurant all day, every day, 7 days a week, and all of a sudden you're hit by a major pandemic. So not only for us, we had to think about certain issues. We had to think about our staff, their staff's families. We also had to take into consideration our food chain, our suppliers who were supplying the restaurant. Although the big chains continue to operate, our smaller suppliers came to a stop. The market stopped. Their supply chain became non-existent. They dropped maybe 90% of trade in a week. And the sad thing about that, they had fields full of produce. They had polytunnels full of produce, with nowhere actually to send it to because the majority of the restaurants were closed. So we come up with a cook at home box so we could adapt the box with a menu using local produce from our suppliers, which then again put the money back into their pockets. Again, we were using products coming from their fields in our box. And one thing it did, we found, was it educated the public of where the food was surrounding them in the local area. And that to us, that was the major thing that came out of it. And we are still continuing that now, even though hopefully the restaurants will be reopening soon.
That's really, really interesting. And it's amazing how resilient and agile our industry has been to, like you say, just change and adapt extremely quickly. And I think that's one of the reasons why it's so important for young people to be thinking about food sustainability issues and why it should be on the curriculum. And I just want your views on that.
I think a major thing, it cuts down on a lot of wastage. I think the guys have spoken about wastage throughout the programme. I think if you get a product and you bring the young people to, or the young chefs to the farmers and the fields, they see the passion that they have for the produce. So when the produce is brought back to the kitchen, then they respect the produce more because they see the time and effort and the factors that involve that product. So they become also more aware of what they're using and less wastage. And again, that comes back to me as an owner, because then it makes it more profitable for the restaurant.
Now, before I move on to Roger, I need to ask you a final question. You're a keen forager. So what do you pick and why do you think it's so important and why is it becoming so popular?
It's like anything now, new trends are arriving. And for us, it's about getting out onto the beach, having a look. Again, it goes down to seasonality, what's coming in, what things to look for. Whereas from elderberries or a lot of stuff we bring back, we ferment. I think James picked up on it there. We salt, we ferment. We're using techniques that were used again hundreds of years ago in Ireland. Fermentation is a big one, and we're using from the land. Again, the benefit of that, again, it's free, and we get to spend time on the beach. We do it, maybe 2 or 3 chefs. We take a day out. It gives us good inspiration to talk to each other and learn from each other. And I think that's what it brings. I think foraging and anything that God teaches us about each other and about the land surrounding us.
Lovely, Jim. Thank you so much. Thank you.
You're welcome.
We'll get back to you shortly.
Thank you.
And lastly, and by no means least, over to you, Roger. Roger swapped a successful career in media sales and marketing to follow his passion for food and cooking in the late 1990s. His varied career path has seen him work in contract catering, as a private chef for some very prestigious families, a sous chef for the Swedish experimental culinary school Avecchia in London, where he worked with many acclaimed Michelin chefs, including Raymond Blanc, Michael Caines, Michel Roux Jr. and Marco Pierre White. Roger joined Nestlé Professional in 2017, and his current role is chef-to-chef manager for Nestlé Professional Nordics. Hello, Roger.
Hi, how you doing? You okay?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm good. I'm going to go back again to this sort of key trends and lifestyle changes and ask you what you're seeing and what you're doing to respond to them.
Okay, it's quite interesting what we're seeing. I mean, we've got some plant-based brands, but under the name of Garden Gourmet, which has been gathering quite a large momentum over the last 18 months or so. That is a direct result of consumer dining habits changing. And just to actually throw some facts behind that and make them very current, actually, 1 in 5 Brits cut down on their meat consumption during the pandemic, which is quite an interesting statistic. 50% of consumers aged 18 to 30 would like the ability to substitute animal products with plant-based alternatives. So that gives you a reason as to why the Garden Gourmet is gathering a large momentum. We also have another brand which I work for quite closely called the Chef brand. And we're working with the Chef brand, for example, it's a flavor solution brand. And we're working on some plant-based products which will come up there, which will really support some of the products that are in the Garden Gourmet range.
Thank you. Now, on to sustainable diets then. So just tell me a little bit more about what you're doing around the plant-based diets.
Okay, so with Garden Gourmet, that's, as I mentioned, the plant-based brand, and it's made with soy protein and wheat protein. If you look at the amount of protein that you actually get from soy, it holds 40% of the protein that you need, whereas, say, for example, a chicken breast will hold 32%. So 75% of that soy currently gets fed to cows. So we're looking at resource reusage from that point of view.
Now, on to what probably is your favourite competition. Let's talk about the theme of the Talkdoor competition this year. It's sustainability. So tell me a little bit, share with us some of the tools and the strategies that you're using to embed this into the competition.
Okay, so what we did in 2019 is we commissioned some research on sustainable choices. And that was quite interesting. It was called Balancing Plates. And it found that half of diners wanted meat-free options when they were eating out, and that 71% of them wanted more healthy options. I sound more like an accountant than a chef, don't I? So what happened in Talkdoor is that the challenges consisted of practical, service-based and business-focused tasks. So the contestants had to create a click and collect business from their own homes, because obviously through COVID it was virtual. And the contestants watched virtual masterclasses from the judges and partners, covering elements of their business plan, which included branding, concept of their business, social media promotion, profitability, nutrition and healthy options, seasonality, local provenance, minimum food waste, balanced diets and menu offering, sustainable packaging, and creating signature dishes and cocktails using a selling strategy via Olio click and collect app. So the main takeaway of the challenge was how the contestants could really create a business that was theirs, promoted themselves, and was really kind of underpinned with sustainability. Interest is being taken for next year's competition, and if anybody's interested, they can show their interest at www.nestleprofessional.co.uk/Talkdoor.
Thank you, Roger. Thank you very much indeed. So before I move over to ask my colleague Andy if we've got any questions from the floor, I just would like to bring all the panelists back together again and just ask a couple more questions. So I think for us, it would be really good to hear what you think the top skills in sustainable food practices are going to be for new people who are coming into our sector. So I think it's important just to think about maybe the change of skills that sustainability is bringing. And I'm going to ask you all to come off mute, and for any one of you just to raise your hand if you'd like to take that question.
Sorry, what was that?
So I'm looking for you guys to be giving us some insight into what you think the top skills in sustainable food practices are. You know, what's emerging now? Roger's just put his hand up, so I'm going to go straight back to Roger.
I'm actually going to draw back to James, because where he mentioned his salt chambers and pickling, there's quite a large movement at the moment, because the other side of sustainability that a lot of chefs don't think about, because is the equipment that they cook on, quite simply, and the infrastructures in the kitchens. It's something that they find themselves in that situation, and I think their perception is it's quite hard for them personally to change it. So with the advent of things like synergy grills, we've seen on the news today where gas is going to be have the addition of hydrogen put into it, so that we'll have less gas usage, for example. But we're also seeing more room temperature foods, again coming back to James's pickling, salting, and a lot of the items that Chantel has on her menu.
I mean, one of the things that obviously we've been opening hotels along the South Coast now for a few years, and I'm lucky enough to be involved in a lot of the design. And one of the things that we obviously do is try to cut down on the amount of gas that we have in the kitchen. Although I find induction during service is sometimes a bit tricky to work with, we do actually use a lot of induction stoves within our kitchen design, and that obviously reduces heat and reduces a lot of the sort of, you know, the smells and all that within the kitchen. I mean, saying that, we do have Jospers, so we use a lot of sustainable charcoal, and then outside we have a wood oven where we use a lot of the trees that are earmarked to be felled because of disease, and we use that to power our wood oven. So all of the wood is from a sustainable source. I think that's quite interesting. I think natural fuels and sort of fire cooking is something that maybe a lot of the young people that we get in haven't had a lot of exposure to. And I think that's something that's very interesting. Going back to the camping and all of the salting, preserving, like I said, is a massive part. And I think it's something which maybe it's quite difficult for young people to get their head around. But once they get it, it's quite interesting to see how they sort of run with it and then sort of expand on it. I mean, you know, something as simple as sort of gravlax or producing smoked salmon. You know, a lot of the guys, they go away and they'll be creating their own cures and their own sort of interpretations of it. So yeah, that's quite interesting.
Thanks, James. Chantal, you were nodding. Let me bring you back in.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I see a lot in my kitchens when new people start is a lack of understanding of waste. And yes, we all know as chefs that we shouldn't waste because that's how we make, you know, a profit, etc. But I think it needs to go further than that. And I think a lot of them won't think anything of kind of putting peelings in the bin or the end of a cucumber or some fish trim, etc. in the bin. And I think it's actually going back much further before that even happens and actually creating that real ownership over the whole of something, whether that's the, you know, the fish bones, the fish skin, all those sorts of things, even vegetables in particular. And I think especially probably in the kind of more fine dining end, there's a huge amount of waste because if something's not perfect, it's put in the bin, or it's not used, or another one's cooked. And I think that whole perception and that learning needs to really happen from day one. And I think even seeing some of the skills that have been in kind of educational facilities in terms of cooking and the really old school kind of, you know, Parisian, all those kind of cuts of things, which actually creates a huge amount of waste. So I think it's actually reinterpreting that as to, okay, if you want, sure, you can teach those skills, but actually you need to teach about what to do with the waste rather than it just be kind of left on the side.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I mean, I was just going to say, going back to what Jim was saying actually earlier, you know, by the young people actually understanding where the food comes from, understanding the whole seasonality thing, you know, they have a lot more respect for that product. I mean, you know, that we tend to find that because the kids have spent time in the garden with the gardeners, they fully understand what the gardeners go through to actually get that product onto the, you know, into the kitchen. So, you know, Chantal, I think you're exactly right. You know, if they're sitting there and they're wasting half of that vegetable, in the back of their minds, they're probably thinking the gardener would go crazy if he saw me the way that I am, and I'm sure the gardener would. You know, and I think this also gives them a next level of respect for their produce, which is something that, you know, you can't really teach if it's just arriving at the back door and then they're peeling it and, you know, away they go. They don't understand the blood, sweat and tears that goes into that, especially in the winter.
Mm.
Jim, I've got to bring you in because you're nodding.
Yeah, no, I just agree with what the guys are saying. We took students to a guy who was rearing ducks, and they seen the process from basically from duck right through to the kill house. It gave them a fascination of the product from start to finish. So when they got the actual product into the kitchen, then they were more aware of how the product was raised and the raisings and all the things that went into raising that animal, to get it into the kitchen to see the final product. And again, it shortened our wastage dramatically. So we took chefs everywhere. We took them out with the fishermen. We took them to make honey. We took them everywhere so they could see the benefits of the work and the passion that went into the product. And it came back tenfold into the restaurant because our wastage declined dramatically.
It can backfire. we had them lambing one year and they didn't want to use any of the lambs. But anyway, we won't talk about that.
Okay, just before I ask Andy if we've got any questions from our audience, let's just think about another area. This is being dubbed, you know, what we're experiencing today is being dubbed as the reset era. You know, there are certain practices that we're just simply not going to go back to. And for me now, it would be really interesting to understand from each of you, what do you think now that we're in a position to address some of the challenges that we've had, what do you think are going to be the sustainable practices that are going to stand the test of time? You know, maybe some of the innovations that you've been forced to do. We spoke earlier, Jim, about you adapting very quickly to the situation that you're in at the moment. What's going to stand the test of time for you? What are you going to keep doing?
I think we have to continuously adapt as chefs. We don't know what's going to happen with this situation unfolding. So we have to adapt dramatically. And I think we have to stick to the same principles, but we have to adapt our techniques and our methods and adapt ourselves as chefs to try and do the same thing we're doing, but do it in a different way. so we can survive in the hospitality industry. I think that's the major thing at the moment.
Thank you. Chantal?
I don't think there's any one particular thing. I think it's changed many things, and I think it's changed relationships hugely. And that's, I think, between the whole supply chain, from landlords right through to the fishermen or the whoever is involved in the business. And I think that there's, I'm hoping that there's a bit more appreciation for all of those parts of the chain. And also from the consumer perspective of actually understanding the true cost of food and the true effort that that we have to put into it, the costs that are involved, and just how much they missed it when it wasn't available. I'm hoping that will translate into them actually appreciating it a lot more.
I heard recently about somebody describing our experiences as exposed, some of the broken social contracts that we've had. And I think that for me speaks volumes. It talks about some of the social contracts we have with the people we work with, with the people that we're serving, with the people that are our supply. And I think you're right, Chantal, those that we have a greater social awareness, I think, too. James, do you want to make a comment?
There's a couple of things. For us, most recently, obviously, it's a supplier thing. We've seen a lot of our small local suppliers across the whole of the South Coast not make it out the first lockdown for financial reasons. Some of them have to diversify into obviously retail, whereas 100% of their business before was wholesale. So we've done a number of measures to support them both on social media as well as on our website to try and get them back into the forefront. We've adapted all different ways of trying to support them, whether it's reducing payment times and all that sort of stuff to try and get their cash flow going again. But within our own sort of hotel group, we're focusing quite heavily on the moment with mental illness, and we've been working with the Burnt Chef Project, trying to sort of support our younger people who we're finding are having a rough time at the moment, with the lockdown and being at home and all of that. So for us, we're focusing on local producers and trying to sort of support our team mentally, as well as we're doing some videos at the moment. We're trying to do how-to videos for the apprentices. So that's something that we're focusing on at the moment, so that they can actually sit at home and see what we're doing and the best way to do things with the all this that's going on. All of the IGTV as well as YouTube and all that. For us, it's a great opportunity to be able to do masterclasses for all of our young people that are sitting at home.
Great, thanks, James. And Roger, before I hand to Andy.
It's a very interesting question, and it's I think, as one of the other panelists mentioned, I think it was Jim that mentioned it, we don't really know kind of where it's going to end, but there's been some interesting changes, and I think Chantal had a very good point in that. I think almost the humanity of those relationships and the way that people and consumers, and this is globally as well as in the UK, have a relationship with food, have a relationship with each other. There's lots of trend data that's suggesting that people are eating comfort foods, maybe more than they should. But also, when I say the way that people consume foods, there's been a lot of restaurants that have turned to takeaway operations. There's a couple of restaurants that haven't particularly wanted to do that, but it's changed their business model. So going back to chefs being very adaptable and being quite adept with seeking out new business models, I think that there may be more direct-to-consumer models.
Thanks, Roger. Thank you. So, Andy, have we got any questions from the audience that you'd like to pose to our panelists?
Well, not want to excusing the pun, but I think obviously the discussions have given a lot of food for thought, because it's been relatively quiet on the questions. But I think, James, you've got lots of people that are wanting to come and become apprentices with you, and I think what that has prompted as a question, as a wider piece, is what are you guys doing to work with teachers and schools maybe around sort of CPD and placements, and to help upskill them to talk about some of these issues?
So so we work with a number of schools. As Sandra said, I'm a member of the Royal Academy of Culinary Arts. I'm a fellow, so I do a lot of work with the Adopt School programme. So I go into about 4 different schools now and deliver taste and sensory classes and talk to young people about the importance of flavour of food and provenance of food and stuff like that. we work with colleges as well, doing a similar thing, going in, doing master classes, trying to sort of get kids to engage with what we're doing. I think, you know, it's quite difficult sometimes to actually get into the colleges sometimes, and we find that it actually works better when teachers approach us and we're able to bring students to the actual hotel and actually show them what we do, because sometimes it's very easy for us to go into colleges and stand there and say we do this and we do that, but in actual fact, if they actually come and see the whole process and actually understand how it works a lot better for us. And I know there's cost implications and there's lots of sort of elements which sometimes make that prohibitive, but it's we work with a lot of colleges, and if anybody would, you know, wanted to visit any of our properties to understand what we do, we always welcome that.
I think you're already starting to get some responses to that coming through. You've got people putting their hands up, and it's actually prompted, sorry Jim, I'm probably dropping you in it here now, because we've had a question through off the back of that from Brona saying about what facilities there are to provide masterclasses and CPD for teachers in Northern Ireland.
And there's quite a few. We have quite a good link with the colleges in Northern Ireland, and we have had for almost 10 years now. And I think the colleges almost encourage the local chefs and owners to come in, and as James said, do some masterclasses or talk about a day to day. We also bring them to the restaurant, and we've had day trips with students as well, where we've took them to farms, we took them to orchards, took them to certain areas. We had a trip to Loch Ness where we went out on the boat with the eel fishermen. We done a question and answer session in the middle of the loch, which was quite surreal. And lucky enough, we had a very calm day to do it. And we stood 3 boats with the students, and they fired questions across to the eel fishermen who have fished, and their families have fished on the loch for hundreds of years. And when they come off to the other side, we went to see how the eels were developed and processed, and the whole thing was very educational. And I've never seen students ask us many questions, and even the lecturers were saying, like, normally they're very quiet, and they've asked us like so many questions, even for days coming after. So I think, going what James said, it's very, very important, I think, to have that link.
Thank you, Jim.
Brilliant. That's been sort of the main questions through. I've got a few people asking independent questions about whether James can, well, I think somebody wants you to travel to Scotland, James, and somebody else to Southampton, so maybe not both in the same day. And a request which, and I guess this goes to all people, but from Simon from the Food Teachers Centre about the opportunities of maybe looking at some further workshops. So I guess we'll pick that one up as a separate piece around sustainability, etc. But those are the main questions that have come through.
Thank you very much, Andy. So let me just close by asking each of you to think about some of the messages that you want to leave our audience with today. So I'll finish where I started and ask Chantal just to come back in and just give some closing remarks for our audience, Chantal.
I think I'd probably just echo what James said about approaching us as well. I think sometimes a lot of us are very time poor, and especially now, and for me personally, it's very hard for me to bring on anyone new financially. Therefore, those opportunities that potentially would have been there in the past aren't there at the moment. But again, for people to come and visit it suits us really well. And I think it's great for them to be exposed to actually what happens in the industry and to hear real chefs actually talking about how they do things and why they do things, rather than it just being someone standing at the front of a classroom and telling them, because I think there's always a much better response when they can actually see, feel and engage in everything that's going on.
Thank you, Chantal. And James?
Yeah, I mean, pretty much the same. I mean, I think that as chefs, we're always learning, and as chefs, we always want to teach. And I think it's important that, we're able to give our young people the most amount of knowledge and exposure that we possibly can. And like I said before, I'd be more than happy to have anybody down to see what we do. Obviously, we've got Pig Hotels from Kent right the way down to Cornwall now. So, we're always open to chat to people. and we love to see young, keen people learn. So, you know, yeah, it's and the more they know about sustainability and the more they know about where their food comes from, the better, I think. And it's something that we'd love to help with in any way that we can.
Thank you, James. Jim, your final message?
Just agreeing with what all the panel had said there. It's just trying to re-educate and just trying to get the word out there. As chefs, sometimes we're very, it's hard, as Chantal says, to get time to do it, but I think we need to take that bit of time out just to share our knowledge with the schools and colleges so they can learn from guys like who you have on the panel today.
Great, thank you, Jim. And finally, Roger.
Yeah, we've, I mean, Nestlé's embarked throughout the pandemic on a campaign that's called Force for Good. And I really would encourage you to go into the Nestlé Professional website and have a look. There's all kinds of different recipes. Some of the like I mentioned, the plant-based brand Garden Gourmet, there's some great recipes on there for that. There's some great recipes for the chef brand, but the whole point being that a lot of them are kind of sector related, so that they're looking to help different sectors within the hospitality industry. And I think for the students, it's a really good way of them actually having a broad look at exactly sort of, how the sector's coming together and what support's there for them from Nestlé.
Thank you so much, Roger. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to all of you and to hear your insights and to hear your experiences. I'm going to wrap things up and bring our event to a close. But I want to just thank again everybody that's contributed towards this event. So back again to you guys, our industry panelists, thank you so much for your time and your contributions this afternoon. It's been very, very insightful. I'd also like to thank Louise at the Food Teachers Centre. I'm a massive fan of the work that Louise is doing and have spoken with many of the food teachers. And again, it's really critical for us to hear industry insights and to be able to make connections between education and employment and industry. I want to thank all of you for attending. I hope you've gained valuable insight from the webinar, and I urge you to look at how you can integrate the teaching resources into your areas of work, and encourage you to share your takeaways with other colleagues or networks that you're part of. We will send you a copy of the presentation and a link to all of the training resources, but we'd also welcome your feedback on the event. And we have a short survey that will appear on the screen just as we close, and we ask you to complete that. Once you've completed the survey, you'll be able to download your PDF certificate of attendance that you can use for your own CPD. And as Roisin said, we are now moving on to the second part of our project with Food for Thought. And we hope that we can re-engage with as many of you as possible with the second stage of our project. But for now, I'm going to thank again our panelists, and I'm going to thank again our participants, and again everybody who's taken the time to be with us this afternoon. I'm going to close the event and wish you all a lovely evening. Thank you.